noise.
Welcome back to the next part of this Truth and Rhythm episode. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. Also become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you so much for your interest and support. Enjoy.
And fantastic Voyage, 1980. What a landmark. You mentioned it, so just keep on with that. What do you remember about putting it together in the studio when it came to be?
Well, again, we had our listening sessions, and songs had been picked, for the album. Actually, Voyage was kind of created in the studio, but what happened was I had two different bass grooves that I've been working on two different demos, and neither one of them seemed like they were living by themselves. So, and the studio decided to put these two bass grooves together, and it clicked. And so we developed the B section that I hadn't come up with. And the idea of Fantastic Voyage came from this movie. We had been out on the road and we had seen this movie we were watching on our a bus called Fantastic Voyage. And for some reason that came back when we were talking about this particular piece of music that we were working on. And as a result, it was the last song that we cut for the record, because we had already done I Need You, Your Love's on the One. We had done Say Yes. We had done all these, and Dick was like, I just need one more. And the one more that we came up with was Fantastic Voyage. So, it was a conglomeration of all of us kind of helping, but the basic track, was the bass line, which I came up with and developed, and we put that together.
What about some of the phrases like slide, slippity slide, and all that you guys came up with? Do you remember working on that?
Yeah. Actually, the way that came about, we were at my house, the singers, me, Mark, Tommy, and Timar, were working on some background parts for the track for Fantastic Voyage. And Mark, because rap was beginning to really happen at the time, he said, why don't we rap? I said, Mark, I don't want to do any rapping because we're singers. I said, the only reason rappers rap is because they can't sing. So I said, well, I have no interest in that at all. So we argued about it. I said, well, the only way I would be interested is if we did it in a choral way, like I think of the Mathis brothers back in the 50s. They used to sing and talk in harmony. I might have that name wrong right now, but there were four brothers, black guys, who sang harmony and talked in harmony. I said the only way I'd be interested if we did something like that and we did it and talked in harmony. So if you notice, all the things that how we're rapping is in harmony. Everybody has a different note, and we're harmonizing in voice. And we put that together. We came up with all of that. The four of us came up with that because we got on a roll, and it just went from one thing to another. And of course, the silly stuff and Toto 2 and all that stuff came from T. Meyer or myself, because we were always the silly ones. But that's how that came about. And so we took it back to the studio the next day, and nobody knew that we did it. And we went in the studio, and everybody just blew everybody away. And so they were like, wow, how did you guys come up with that? We said, well, this is how we explained how we did it. So after we finished the record, I don't know if you knew this, but the rap only appeared after the second verse in the middle of the song. Did you ever know that? Okay, well, when we took it to Dick, he was so blown away. He said, the rap has to go up at the front, because he said that's so dynamic that has to be the opening of this record. And we were like, Dick, we don't want to do that because we like it being a surprise in the middle of the record. He's like, you know what? I'm making an executive decision. And guess what? It was at the beginning of the record. He was right, because it just blew up. And that was part of it, but it was so unique and so innovative in what we did with that he was right. It caught everybody's attention right away, because that's how the song opens. Hey, come on, come along. And it's like, wow, here we go. And so he was right, but we may have spoiled it had we done it the way we wanted to do it. But he was right. And I told him after that, but I said, Dick, you were right. It was the right thing to do, put it at the top of the song. So that was Dick was good at that. He saw things sometime that we didn't see. That was one of his strengths. He knew talent, and he knew how to find, he could smell talent, so he had some very, very strong talents as a manager, and all the things that he did for and with Lakeside.
And Lakeside got the production credits on that record too.
Yes, finally. Well, we took over after the first two albums that Leon produced, and we co-produced with him. And we were learning how to produce, because we weren't really producers at the time. We were learning. And Dick needed somebody in the studio with us who could guide us. And so Leon was very good. I learned a lot from Leon as a songwriter and a producer. And so he got so overwhelmed with working with everybody at Solar, including Lakeside, Midnight Star, Whisper, Shalimar. I mean, you name them, he was working with them. So Dick said, well, I'm going to put you guys, in charge. So he asked me if I would be the one to kind of be in charge. And the way it happened, he talked to me, and he said, if it came down to, just talent, then you and Steve are basically equal. But he said, you being a little bit more responsible and not as a party guy as some of the other guys, that's kind of how I ended up with the head production gig with Lakeside. And it wasn't something we talked about. It was put on the album as produced by Lakeside, but the production was basically done by myself and Steve Shockley. And of course, everybody had ideas, but Dick said, you can't produce as a group. He said, you're never going to agree on things as a group. Somebody has to have the last say. And so that's why he had to designate somebody, who had the last say. And it was myself. And then he said, who would you want to be in that production seat? And I said Stevie, because of course Stevie, is a fantastic guitarist, songwriter, and arranger. So we were the ones that basically were in charge of the production from Fantastic Voyage through my last album, which was Outrageous. That was the last album I participated in. So after that, I don't know who took over. It probably was Stevie and whoever else they brought in. But for those albums, it was myself and Steve. We were basically the production. And actually, we went to the group one time and asked them if we could get production credit. And they said no. We didn't ask for more money. We just asked for production credit, and it was a no. So we said, okay, well, it is what it is. And we were just trying to do what was best for the group, because we were always going to do our best. Well, we didn't get paid extra or anything. We just were the ones that did the lion's share of the work. So that's kind of how that turned out, Scott.
And how did the band tend to operate in the studio? Did you guys play a lot together as a band, or separate tracking, or how were things put together?
At that time, beginning with Shout of Love, we were tracking, we would go in the studio. Everybody had the baffles around them, the guitar with the, on the bass, and drummer, he'd be baffled in and everything it was like that. And then, we would lay the basic tracks, and then we would clean up tracks, by going in and cleaning up the parts on the guitar or the bass or whatever needed to be fixed, and then doing overdubbing. But all of our basic tracks at that time were done with musicians playing. We didn't actually start using drum machines like the OBX and stuff like that until the Outrageous album, which is when I started to kind of grow apart with the group musically, because I thought Outrageous was more like Midnight Star sound than it was Lakeside sound. And I said that to the band. I said, we have a style, but we seem, and Dick was all for this because, they had just hit with No Parking on the Dance Floor. So that was a Platinum Plus album. So Dick was interested in anything that was sounding like that. So some of the stuff that we had was sounding like that. So Dick was all in. And to me, I thought we were losing our musical identity. So that's kind of when I started losing interest because, once you have a sound and once you have a musical direction, you have to finish the course. You have to do, whatever it is, you have to continue doing what you do. And that's all you can do. Because once you jump ship and you start doing something else, which is out of your character for you, I don't think success will ever be there.
I couldn't agree more. And, I think one of the other characteristics that made Lakeside unique was, the not having horns,
Yes.
And I think that also helped the band transition well to the 80s because the horns took a back seat in the 80s as synthesizers, kind of took that spot.
Yeah, but our philosophy there, Scott, was that we didn't want to put anything on the record we couldn't reproduce live. We didn't have horns, so whatever parts we're gonna put on the record have to be able to be produced by synthesizers, guitars, or whatever we're playing. And that's why Lakeside sounds like the records, because nothing on the records we can't produce live. And that was something we went into the studio. It's got to be something we can produce live, and that has really paid off for us because a lot of bands now are using digital enhancement on stage. On a Lakeside concert, good or bad or indifferent, whatever you hear is live. Okay. There's no help coming from anywhere. We are completely live. And some nights we are on, amazingly sounding like the record. And then those nights, you got a couple of flaws here and there, but that's, to me, the live experience. You're hearing people live. I don't want to go to a concert and most of what you're hearing is coming from digital sources. I just don't think that's right. And especially us, we don't come from there. All the groups we grew up with, Cameo, SOS, Barcades, Confunction, we came from playing. There was no such thing as digital enhancement growing up on the concert scene where we came from. So a lot of people have adapted that theory today, but Lakeside is still live and in color. All the way live.
Beautiful thing, yeah. Flying without a net,
Yes, sir. Yeah, and sometimes when the net's not there, you find it, you see it sometime. But we laugh about it, because you're gonna have guffaws sometimes, train wrecks here and there, and it goes with the territory. But we always find a way to get out of it. So it doesn't happen very often, but anything can happen live, and that's what I'm talking about. It's the live experience with Lakeside, good, bad, or indifferent. It is live.
And that record with Fantastic Voyage, what a 1-2 punch that started off with too, because Your Love Is on the One came right after it.
Yeah, buddy. Oh man, we were killing. And those songs today, Your Love Is on the One, is still a crowd pleaser, and it's even funkier live than it is on the record, in my opinion, because all those guitars and all that stuff is hitting. And it's heavy, so I enjoy playing those songs live. They're just great songs to play.
Well, speaking of live, Otis, so back then, I'm sure you were out with just about every group. I'm wearing this shirt. I wore it in honor of Lakeside because you guys are. I don't know if you can see right below Brick.
I see it. Yeah,
Lakeside, yeah.
There you go.
So you probably played with most of these bands that are on here at some point. Who were a couple that you thought just killed it off in here, like the Barcades, but who were a couple from them that you just thought?
Man, early on, we did our first, when we All the Way Live came out, we went from doing clubs 6 nights a week for $1,200 to one night 30-minute shows for $2,500. That's the difference in how quickly your financial situation can turn. And we went out with the Barcades on our first major tour doing arenas, and we were with the Barcades, Rolls Royce, Evelyn Champagne King, and Barcades took us under their wing and kind of became big brothers to us, and they saw to it that we got sound checks. Opening acts didn't get sound checks in those days, but because we were touring a lot with the Barcades, and for some reason they befriended us and liked us, they always saw to it that we did. So they were hitting at that time because we learned a lot from those guys in terms of how to perform on the big stage, and so we were mentored by them, and we worked with some of the best guys that I've ever worked with is the Barcades. I think Rick James was really good live, but I got a story about Rick. We played with him at the Capitol Center. I think it was in '83. And it was sold out, and it was a Bud Fest. We were on the same Bud Fest, basically the same acts for several dates. And we had a date in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol Center, and then we had a date the next night in Atlanta at the Omni. And so, and this was when Midnight Star was hot with Freakazoid and No Parking on the Dance Floor. They had just broken, and their record was on fire. So they were on the show. And so they went on before us, and the stage was hot, and we always looked at other people's shows before we went on, and we were back in the dressing room. It was like, man, we gonna have to work tonight. Midnight Star lit that stage up, so that's how we would do it. We'd take it as competition, So we went out and we stomped, and so Rick had to come on after us, and Rick had a bunch of hits. I don't know why he was so upset, but we left the stage pretty hot for him. So the next night in Atlanta, when we get there, the promoter of the Bud Fest, his name was Michael Rosenberg. He came to us in the dressing room, and he wanted to talk to us and say, "You guys, if you could do me a favor tonight and not use your effects, because we had teardrop lights and pyro and things like that helped enhance the production." And so he said, because if you do that, it would be a big favor to me, because Rick was very upset with you guys last night. He didn't like the fact that you use all this stuff and your guys' show was as good as it was. And so we told Mike, we said, "Okay, Mike." As soon as he left, we said, "Yeah, right. We're not going to use." So we went out there, we used everything we were supposed to use. And in the middle of the show, we were just getting ready to do "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and there's a little confusion on I'm stage right. So on the left side of the stage, there was some stuff going on over there, and so we come to find out after the show that Rick James had his people trying to take the piano off the stage and remove equipment during our show. Well, of course, there were some things that happened that, our people had to defend us on stage, and nobody removed anything, I'll say, and we finished our show. But Dick was mad. I mean, not Dick. Rick was mad because he had told Mike to take care of it, and Mike, I guess he took care of it, but he didn't take care of it because we went ahead with our show, and of course we did a good job that night. And so we heard it from Mike after that, but we didn't care. We're just trying to do a good show. We are performers, and what we always did. It's just like we saw Midnight Star burn. We said, well, we're not going to go out there and try to cripple these guys. We have to do a better show. That's how we took it. When somebody went on before us and lit up the stage, our job now is, hey, we got to go out there. Now we got to work because the stage is hot. So we got to get the stage back to us. Instead of him doing that, he was like, well, I'm going to try to cripple Lakeside so that their show is not as dynamic and as good as it is. And we were like, no, we're going to go to work. And that's what we did. So I'll never forget that story, because Rick and I were pretty friendly at that point. He never spoke to me again.
Wow.
Never spoke to me again. Mm-mm.
Wow. Did you guys have shows after that, or was that the last show with Rick?
That was, as I remember, that might have been the last show. I don't remember. And if it was uneventful. It was nothing like that. If there were other shows after that, but that might have been the last show in Atlanta at the Omni. But it was eventful. But you're not taking anything off. And the other thing about it, we all shared equipment on that show because it made the set changes quicker. So the equipment, except people's axes and stuff and common stuff, it didn't belong to anybody. Everybody used the same thing. So he's taking stuff off the stage. He's having his people take stuff off the stage that didn't belong to him. So we're like, no, we're not moving. And see, we didn't find any of this all because they handled it pretty good. Our crew handled it really well because they kept it, even though we knew something was going on. We didn't know exactly what until we came off stage, but our crew handled it very well because nothing was removed from the stage and there were no other incidents. So I'll give them credit for taking care of their business.
Wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned, go ahead.
I was going to tell you another story when we were talking about bad experiences. We only had one other bad experience, and it was with Frankie Beverly and Mays. We were in Louisville, Kentucky, and it was supposed to be Lakeside. And we had been on the show with him a couple of days before that, by the way, and kind of heated up the stage. So when we get to Louisville, we get to the sound check. And when I tell you the stage was humongous, it was enough to accommodate about 4 bands. When I tell you it was humongous, I mean, it's no understatement. It was supposed to be us. What was her name? Oh, I can't think of her name. It wasn't Phyllis Hyman, but it was somebody like that. And she ended up being sick, so she wasn't there. So it ended up being just Lakeside and Frankie Beverly and Mays. So when we get to the arena for our sound check, Frankie's stuff is set up so far to the front of the stage that we didn't have room to set up basically the band, let alone the singers. So it was enough room behind them to set up 2 bands. So we were like, why are you set up here? Well, this is once we set our stuff up, we don't move it. So this is his people. So obviously they were under directions. So we got in touch with the promoter, who at that time was Al Heyman. And we were like, Al, we got nowhere to work. And he said, well, talk to the stage manager, y'all work it out. He never had them move the stuff. So Lakeside, this is the only time we did not perform. We got paid, but we didn't perform because we said we're not going to perform under these conditions where we can't work. And you can put 2 bands behind him and barely can put 1 in front. And so he was the only person to perform on that show. And a lot of people were upset because people went to the box office that were there to see us and they wanted their money back and stuff like that. But again, this shows you that some people, instead of you lifting your game up and performing instead of trying to cripple someone else's performance, we never did that. When we were headlining, it didn't matter how hot a group was before us. We never tried to, hamper them in the show that we had with them after that. It was just, we knew we had to go to work. And that was always our attitude. It doesn't matter how good they are, we have to be better. And that was, and Dick called us the baddest band in the land. And we still hold that title because, we still get the job done.
Did you make a lot of TV appearances?
Well, most of the TV appearances that I was in, when I was in the group, were the Soul Trains and the Dick Clarks. And actually, we had done Soul Trains since our very first album, which didn't do anything, but I did with Frank that If I Didn't Have You, because Dick and Don Cornelius were very good friends. So automatically, his groups were going to go on Soul Train. We didn't actually go on Dick Clark until Fantastic Voyage. That was when we finally got a chance to go on Dick Clark, because I guess we weren't big enough or whatever. And then we went on there twice. We went on there for Outrageous, and we went on there for the Fantastic Voyage album. And that's our only 2 appearances on there. Now, we did some other local shows and stuff like that, but nothing I can remember bigger than that during the time I was with the band.
You mentioned I Want to Hold Your Hand, and that was seemed like so much of a left turn at that time, to do a remake, to do something down tempo. What was the thought process, as you guys moved in that direction for that particular project?
Well, we were on the road somewhere, and we were in the dressing room, and I just started singing I Want to Hold Your Hand, and we slowed it down. We did it kind of bluesy, and everybody's like, man, that's a good idea. So we took that, ran with it. When we got back home and got in the studio, that's what we did. And what we had basically come to the conclusion of, I Want to Hold Your Hand is a love song, but because it's so up-tempo, you get the whole love story involved. So we said, we're going to slow it down, do it as a ballad, and we're going to exploit the love story in I Want to Hold Your Hand. And that's how all that basically kind of came to fruition. We put it together as a real love song with the ballad in it. And that is really one of the crowd pleasers when we perform it live, because it's kind of a rock kind of a thing going on with it, and when we play it bigger than it is on the record. So it really, people really, really enjoy the version of I Want to Hold Your Hand. And a lot of people didn't know it was us, because I know we've done some gigs and people say, you guys recorded that? And it's like, yeah, and they ask us what album. We tell them, and say, well, we're going to get that, because they didn't know. They might have heard the song, but, Lakeside been known for funk. They probably never put it together and said, well, that, it's Lakeside. They didn't know. So now that they know, that's a record that they go and they buy now because they really like it. But it was one of my favorites on the album. I really thought it was a great version. And I met Paul McCartney one time, and I gave him the CD, and his wife told me that he really liked our version. So that was quite a thrill.
I can imagine. It must have been a thrill, especially kind of going back to a little bit. You said you had some rock influence, and
Oh yeah, because I grew up on rock and roll. I grew up with all that stuff, man. And for a while there, me and my brothers and our little group of people, all we did is go to rock shows. We went to see, Yes is actually my favorite band. And I've seen them, I don't know how many times. The first time I saw them was in Dayton at Hare Arena. And I was a fan ever since. I mean, I've seen the Stones. I've seen Rod Stewart, actually opened for Rod Stewart in France in 1986 at the Bercy. I was an opening act for him, and my business partner, Michelle Elizabeth, who was very good friends with the promoter of that European tour, put me on the show. And it was really a favor, because I had no records out, and I was a no-name guy. I was just Otis Stokes, so nobody knew me. And I didn't expect to, do anything but open for Rod Stewart. I wasn't going there with any expectations of killing the crowd, because I'm playing unknown music and I'm an unknown artist. But they were very polite, and they applauded and stuff. And I did my set and I got off, and the great Rod Stewart came on. But he shared the stage with me, and I'll never forget that, because he told me he didn't see the show, but he heard I was very good. And so we had he had a party and a dinner after that we went to, and just being around a guy like that, it was just unbelievable. One of the high points of my career.
How did it come about that you took on doing a solo project, and what were your aspirations?
Well, I always wanted to do a solo project, and two things I wanted to do. I wanted to do a solo project, and I wanted to see if I could do it and play all the instruments on it. And so I accomplished both. Unfortunately, I did a single on there, which was a remake of I Wish It Would Rain by the Temptations. And, I did it with a video that accompanied it. It was a very good video, by the way. And it didn't really do much. It did okay, but it didn't really do much. And the record didn't break, because we were with a distribution company called Raging Bull at the time, which was owned by Joe Isgro, who, I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was in charge of record promotion on the West Coast. At one time, he was the main guy that if he had your record was going to be a hit. And he had been involved in all that payola stuff. He actually did some time for it, a lot of stuff. And we met him after he had gotten out of jail, and he was getting back into his business as promoting and everything else. So he told us he could do it, and he didn't have the power that he once had, we found out, because at one time, if he said the record was going to play and it was going to be number one, it would be number one, because he had that kind of power. And so we were aligning ourselves with him in hopes that we would be able to get some of that same magic, and it didn't work for us. But I did everything on the album. There's one saxophone solo on it that a friend of mine played, and that's the only instrument on there that I didn't play.
Did it take you a long time to put that together, doing all the parts?
Yeah, it did. But because I knew what I wanted on everything, I would take it track by track. I'd finish a track and then I'd go to the next one, And it was really an experiment, because I didn't know if I could actually do it. But I did. And I think I did a good job. The only thing I didn't do is produce any hits. And that's always your goal when you go in the studio, is to produce some hits. And it didn't work out that way. And a lot of it had to do with, at that time, I was older, and this music is youth oriented, and so once you get past a certain age, they're really not interested in what you're doing. I mean, and case in point, you can, Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind and Fire and Lionel and all these people are still putting out music, but guess what? None of them are getting any hits because their season for hits are pretty much in the past. And that's just the reality of it. It doesn't say anything else than that. It's not to be an indictment against their talents anymore, because they're still multi-talented, because they still go out, and Stevie is still Stevie and he can still sing and play great. But people are not interested in their music of today. And I had developed a radio show, which I actually had done everything, and I had 13 stations on it in the South, where I was doing what I call the Classic Artist Network, and I was basically playing all the older artists, I used to call them classic artists, their newer stuff. And this was going on in 2000. And I was playing stuff by Rick James at the time, who had some new stuff out, Prince, Stevie, Lenny Williams. All these people had new music out, but it wasn't playing anywhere. So I was trying to create a venue or a place for it to be, because if I could have gotten this station syndicated, the Classic Artists Network, then it would have been targeted to our demographic, which is the baby boomers. And so youth is not our audience. The millennials are not our audience, even though they know our music and they will listen to it when they play the old stuff, but they're not interested in hearing anything new from us. So the only way we can do it is to create another venue, another outlet for the music. And that was the purpose of the Classic Artists Network. And I still think it's a viable concept, but I have not been able to get the right person involved with it, because I was doing this in 2000, 2001. Well, when I was doing it then, Usher and Mary J. Blige and a lot of these people were very current and still playing on all the top pop radio stations. Well, guess what? Now they're classic artists, and Usher's not playing on regular radio anymore, and Mary J. Blige. So the same thing is happening to each generation of artists. So the Classic Artists Network is a concept that will go on forever, because Justin Timberlake will be a classic artist one day. Justin Bieber will be a classic artist one day and will no longer be relevant to the young audience. So this is a concept I believe could go on forever, but I have not been able to find that one person or company or situation that can take it to the level that it needs to be.
Well, I love that concept, Otis, because I always love new material. I always want to hear new stuff from the artists that I've always loved. Me
too.
So having a venue for that really exposes it and encourages it and supports it, fantastic.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it still will have a place somewhere, because, like I said, it to me, it can go on forever, because everyone has their season as an artist, and some seasons are longer than others, but sooner or later your season will be over. And then, you'll be able to live on as we have lived on with our catalog of songs. We can still go out and perform, and we can still, make money that way. But record sales is basically a thing of the past. You can sell a few if you sell them, when you're performing and stuff like that, but it's nothing like what it used to be in the day when we were really selling records.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Back in the days when, Lakeside was scoring more hits with things like Something About That Woman, which is another track.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on another great one on that same record as I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Mm-hmm. That's written by Steve Shockley. And interesting story about that record. We were in the studio. We pretty much had everything together. The vocals and everything was on it. And Stevie was sitting at the board, and we were playing the track. And all of a sudden, he muted all of the drums and all that in in those parts where, when the drums stop, well, there used to be drums throughout that song until we were like, man, that's bad. And so we started doing it that way. And that's how the song ended up being the way it is, where it starts off with that guitar and then comes in with the drums. And then when he goes into there she goes again, that's when everything drops out except the hand claps of the rhythm and the guitar stuff. And then when it gets back to the second part of that verse, the drums come back in. That used to be drums throughout, but it worked that it was better with the drums out in those, because it gave it that little push and that little surprise thing. That was an accident. That was him just playing with the buttons, and and that ends up how the record is that we actually put out, and it became a hit. So that's a little trivia for that record.
Wow. Another happy accident.
Yeah, it really was, because we were like, man, that's bad. Because we were like, man, that's bad. We need to do that. So we plugged it into the board, and we didn't have to do it anymore manually, because those Total Recall boards where you just put it in there and you record it, and you have to do it manually anymore. And that just became the way it was, and that's how it ended up on the record. But yeah, that was something that nobody knew. It was one of those, like you said, happy accidents.
And you guys, definitely had not only the identifiable sound and style, but also the visual element on the album covers. With the artwork and the costumes and things like that. Was that something that you took any part in terms of the way it was presented, or how did that evolve?
Well, we came up with the concepts, like the first one we decided, because Shout of Love was something that kind of lended itself to the Merry Men and Robin Hood and stuff. We took that theme as the concept for the first album. And then going forward, because we liked it, we decided every record was going to have a different theme, and the Rough Riders was the Cowboys, and of course Fantastic Voyage was the Pirates. And then we became the what was that? Something about that woman. We were the Genies and that kind of thing. That was actually Your Wish Is My Command. And then we had Untouchables when we were the G-Men. And so each time we, went and we rented costumes and we did the whole thing and got sets and all that and did it. And so I wanted to correct something. Fred Lewis's brother Dennis, may he rest in peace. He's gone also about 3 or 4 years ago. Anyway, for some reason, everybody was thinking that he did all our album covers. Well, he did our first Shout of Love, Rough Riders, Fantastic Voyage, and Your Wish Is My Command was done by this graphic artist company called Gribbit. Gribitt, and it had a little exclamation point. That was their logo on their name. And they did the first 4 album covers. And then we did the throwaway album, which we called it for RCA, which was, what is it called? Keep On Moving Straight Ahead. We had so many albums, I forget what they are sometimes. But Keep On Moving Straight Ahead was done by RCA. We don't know who did the artwork for that, but it really wasn't good. We didn't like it, but we had nothing to do with it. So what had happened was Big Fred's brother, Dennis, he had been pitching Dennis for us for like at least 2 or 3 albums. Man, my brother can draw. You don't know this guy. And he shows us stuff. And the reason we didn't is because we were thinking, well, man, if this guy's not good, then we're going to have to fire him. And that's going to be a problem with Fred, because we got to fire his brother. So we talked about that. So finally, he talked us into seeing Dennis. Dennis came in, man, and he drew the Untouchables album. And we were like, what? You drew that? It was so lifelike. And he drew his brother, he drew his Fred so well, it was like a picture. I said, well, you drew him the best because you've been looking at him your whole life. But it was amazing. From that point on, Dennis became our graphic artist. He did every cover after that. And I think he did it past when I left the group. But that's why he didn't get the job early, because we didn't want to have to worry about if he wasn't that good. If we'd have to fire him, and that would have been a problem. So we avoided that until we really saw this guy's work, and he really, really was good. And he made us believers. And like I said, he became our graphic artist from that point on.
I gotcha. Yeah, that was an impressive package for sure.
Yeah.
Untouchables.
And
another one of my very favorite Lakeside tracks, Raid. What do you remember about laying that one down?
Well, Raid, man, we were trying to find something that was in a nice groove. It was a party record, and we were a party band. We like to do songs that make people dance. So Raid, the whole concept was, this is a raid. The party's on. When we come to town, that's it. Lakeside's here. The party is on. So we were able to put that on record, and that's one of our biggest records too. And people love it live because it's just a party record. We have a ball with it too. But yeah, that was fun putting together. And again, that was on the album where we pretty much wrote everything together on the Untouchables album. So we all had a hand in all those tracks on that particular record.
Well, Raid 2 seemed to go well with the G-Man theme, it's going to be a bust,
Yeah, well, that's what they do. They raid joints, all the speakeasies and stuff like that. That's what they did. So, but yeah, I had I started doing demos outside of the band because, I wanted a different musical perspective on things, So what I would do, I found this guy, Monty Stewart, and he was a very, very talented piano player. And I kind of met him. I don't remember if I met him before, but I know I met him coming out of Solar one time, and he knew I was. So we stopped and talked. And so he asked me to take a look at this deal that he got from Dick Griffey, because Dick was trying to sign him as a songwriter and publisher, songwriting deal. And so I looked at the deal for him, and I told him, I said, Monty, don't sign the deal. I said, because it's not in your benefit. It's not in your best interest. And he didn't sign the deal. So after that, we became really good friends. And so I wanted to do demos, and he had the studio over off of 54th, on 54th off of Crenshaw called CBA. And so I said, well, can you find me some musicians? Because I want to do some demos. He said, yeah. So I came to him. And a Real Love is actually one of the demos I did with CBA. And the musicians that he provided for me was Cornelius Mims, Derek Organ, and Tommy Organ. Kipper would always be there, but he would do background sometime. And he had Rex Salas, and that was my band. And so I started cutting. Oh, and one time Rex wasn't available for the studio, so he substituted him with Chucky Booker. And then one time Derek, who played the drums, wasn't available, and he substituted him with Jonathan Moffett. I don't know if you know who Jonathan Moffett is. He was a drummer for a lot of Michael Jackson's tours. And so these are people that I kind of brought through the Solar doors, and got into the business, because I started using them for different things, like on Climax, and I used them on stuff. And so they were so amazing as musicians that people just started using them, and they went on to do just about everything with everybody that you can imagine. In fact, Tommy Organ, the guitar player, was on Michael's last tour, the This Is It tour, that never happened, because he's on that video where they're interviewing everybody. Tommy is on it. I was like, that's Tommy Organ. But he was getting ready to go on that last tour, and unfortunately it didn't happen. Michael passed. But those are the guys that I brought in, and I just introduced them to other people, and their talent was so big that they were able to make their own way. So I always want to talk about them, because they went on to do a lot of things. And in fact, Tease was the name of the group, except for Monty. And I was going to sign them. I had something working over at MCA Records with Gerald Busby, but for some reason he backed out of the deal.
Speaking of these Solar acts, that was quite a stable of acts that you guys were part of there. And, you branched out and collaborated with some of those. Whispers and so forth.
Right.
What can you tell us about some of those experiences, and also Climax, of course?
Well, I was a studio rat. I was always in the studio, even when we weren't working, because Leon and I were very, very good friends. And so I would always be in the studio with him, just watching him work with whoever, Dynasty, Shalimar, Whispers, whoever. And so they were having a listening session for the Whispers, and they used to always have it at the studio where you play your stuff from, the demos on those big speakers in there. So I had a song I've been working on called Jump for Joy. and they liked it. So Steve and little Fred helped me with the song, and we produced that on the Whispers. I can't think of the name of the album it was on right now, but it was one of the earlier albums. And then just being around, working with Leon, he wanted me to co-write the song that he was doing with Shalimar, Somewhere There's a Love. And so just being in the right place at the right time gave me opportunities to do stuff. And so Dick would be at the studio. He'd come by whenever who was working, and he'd come in. He'd see me all the time in there. He's like, "You're always in the studio." I said, "Yeah, I'm trying to learn." So I was just trying to be absorbed, and learn and see how it's done. And so those opportunities, especially after, doing things with Lakeside and being kind of, in charge of the production of Lakeside, he hooked me up with this guy, W.G. Garrison, who was out of Baton Rouge, and he had a group called Seventh Wonder. And Leon and I co-wrote, they had a pretty mild hit called The Tilt. And I co-wrote that with Leon. And then I wrote a song called Stop Before You Break My Heart. And I did that on the Seventh Wonder. It did okay, but nothing huge, but it made a little noise for them. And they went on and WG got them other producers and stuff like that. But then that led to the Climax deal with Dick. He had seen this all-girl band, and there was a woman used to work with him in A&R at Solar named Margaret Nash. Everybody called her Sissy. She was married to Graham Nash, wrote the song I Can See Clearly Now. Was that, it wasn't Graham Nash.
Johnny Nash.
Johnny Nash, yeah. She was married to Johnny Nash. And so she had been working with, she actually found Climax and she brought him to Dick. So Dick was thinking about, doing something for me, giving me a project. And so he took me to see them at their rehearsal place, and they played for us. And so when we left, Dick said, "What do you think?" I said, "I think they're pretty good." He said, "You think we can do something with them?" I said, "Yeah." So he said, "You want the project?" I said, "Yeah." So, I didn't care who they were. I was going to do the project because it would have been an opportunity for me to produce. So we started working on them, and I co-wrote a lot of songs with Steve Shockley for the first album, and we didn't get a bite off of anything we did. So second album, I wrote the title song "Girls Will Be Girls," and I wrote "If You Let Me" on there. And Steve did some of his own songs in production on that one. And he really just kind of split it up because Jimmy and Terry did a song or two on there, and other people were he was just trying to see who could get something, And that's how that started and got me with Climax. Unfortunately, we never got a hit. I thought we were doing some good stuff, but there's just no formula. Everybody goes in the studio thinking they're making hits, and it doesn't always turn out that way. Because believe me, if everybody knew the formula, nobody would put out anything but hits. But unfortunately, there's no tried and true formula. You just go in with what you think are good songs and good production, and you do your best and see how it turns out. So it didn't work out for me with Climax at all. But along the way, I learned more about producing and writing and those kinds of things. So I continued to grow as an artist.
Well, maybe it wasn't as big as, being in the ladies' room, but Never Underestimate the Power of a Woman was a killer track in my estimation.
Yeah, and Bernadette and some of the others wrote that. That was really the name of the first album. It was a killer track, and I thought, that would have done something myself. But again, you just never know how these things turn out. It's just throw the dice. You throw it out. You do your best, and you hope that people will like it like you do. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. Yeah.
How would you sum up your composing process? What do you draw inspiration on, and how do you put a song together?
A lot of it has to do with life situations. Sometimes they're not necessarily life situations, but you create stories relative to life, like love stories, and you create situations between characters and stuff like that. And usually if I'm writing a ballad, I'm usually writing it on a piano or a guitar. If I'm doing funk or up-tempo, I'm usually always doing that with the bass. because that's always the foundation for something that you're trying to do that's going to be funky or up tempo. So usually when I do that, that's kind of my writing style. I write, if I'm sitting down for a ballad, I'm going to do it a certain way. If I'm sitting down for something up tempo, it's going to be done a totally different way. And then I usually come up with melodies, for the hook. I usually come up with the hook first, and the hook usually have a name or something that is going to be the story. For example, Nine and Teal. Well, now I'm talking about a party. So now everything, the story and the melody for the verses are built around that. So I'm sure everybody has their own method of writing, but that's mine. That's the way I create. I usually will come up with the hook. Rarely have I written lyrics to the verses before I came up with a hook, because the hook to me is the basic foundation of the story. And you can tell the story around, like, I Need You. Well, that tells you pretty much in the title what the song is going to be about. You love somebody, you need that person, and so forth and so on. Real love, as again, it's a love song. So we're talking about how love is and how strong it is. And it's not always real love, but when you find it, that's what the song is about. So it's various ways to do it, but that's the way I find that works for me.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.